still, close your eyes. Feel your way into the heart space. Understand that this is a magical moment for all of us. That medicine of Madre has brought us all together in an amazing opportunity to create community and heal the earth. We bless this gathering and all that grows from it, and we bless Rack on his journey as he goes into the world to take more of Madre's magic. So thank you all for being here, and bless all of you fine souls for caring enough about the planet to give some time on this wonderful Friday night.
Thank you, Margaret. This is a sample of ayahuasca. Margaret referred to it as the Madre. That is what they call ayahuasca in Peru. There is lots of names actually. There's Ayahuasca or Yaje or Yage or the Mother. It is very much a feminine plant and the spirit in it. I'd just like to say a few brief words about why we're here and what my involvement is in getting us all here tonight. I think I've always been interested in shamanism and in the esoteric or in the spirit realms or just things that are outside the mainstream world. For me, there's more, I've found a lot of meaning in trying to be on my own spiritual journey and to realise that we're all on a journey. Some of us are aware of it, some of us aren't. And you know, a lot of the things we're going to discuss here about ayahuasca and shamanism is just a path that I have travelled on and other people have travelled on. It is not the only path, there are many paths. One of the sayings in mythology is that all paths lead to God eventually. Ayahuasca for me is something that came into my life in around 2006. I call myself an experiential journalist. I don't really do the 9 to 5 very well in the mainstream boxes. I'm a writer and an editor, and I set out on a journey to look into Amazonian shamanism and what the archetype of the shaman means in the 21st century. It's often a term that is bandied about and has become really sort of Hollywoodized in a way in the West. It's an archetype, and the archetypes have power to them because they are true. You know, there's something embedded in archetypes which we all remember in our genetic memory or our history, our heritage, culturally. There's mythology there. So I set out on an assignment in 2006 to travel to Peru and discover what was happening with the booming business of Amazonian shamanism. I remember, before that, in the years before that, it was something I always thought was very remote and distant and maybe not accessible. The role of Peruvian or Amazonian shamanism was something that I couldn't imagine going. And I'd heard through friends of friends, and there was basically a shamanism or ayahuasca network, and I call it a spiritual backpacking circuit, like the backpacking circuit of the soul, that is focused on Peru, on the Amazonian cities of Iquitos and Pucallpa, and there's also quite a presence of shamanism, Andean shamanism in Cusco, and all throughout Peru and all throughout South America. Ayahuasca is a vegetal medicine that has been around for millennia. Indigenous people and artifacts and anthropological evidence shows that it has been used for thousands of years. The West has only stumbled across ayahuasca in the last 150 or so years, and since then there's been a very slow trickle of understanding about it. It's something which has been very, very esoteric and on the fringe. William Burroughs travelled through South America in the 1950s and wrote the Age Letters with Allen Ginsberg, and that was maybe one of the first countercultural points of call where that entered the media. And I think as a journalist, it's very important that we represent this movement and this substance and the people and the issues involved in it in a correct way with integrity. And the Age Letters was almost the first Western understanding of that in counterculture that then started to spread. Terence McKenna was an author who talked a lot about ayahuasca in the 90s and helped popularise its awareness in the West. And since then it has really snowballed. Like, it's really an organic evolution. There's been pathways developing, and I travelled there in 2006 to Peru on assignment, and what I did was drink with the curanderos. In the West, their idea of the shaman, they don't have an understanding of shaman. It's a Western term which comes from the Siberian import. And they call their healers curanderos or curanderas, which is from the Spanish to heal. And in a very real sense, that is what the shamans in indigenous cultures are. They're healers. A lot of cultures over in Peru, outside the cities, all along the Amazon basin, don't have access to a lot of Western goods. The ones that do are medicines, and ayahuasca is used as a medicine. It's very much endemic everywhere. Like, everyone does ayahuasca. It's not a drug in the Western sense, and that's really important to understand. The Western paradigm, the Western understanding, has this ability to commodify things and to make them easily packaged up and, the matrix red pill, if you will. And ayahuasca is not that. Ayahuasca, as you can see, is a plant. It's a vegetal medicine. There's probably, in my experience and a lot of people's experience, there's also a very spiritual nature to taking ayahuasca and being involved with the spirit of ayahuasca. And the whole idea of Amazonian shamanism is that there is a spiritual realm. There is like the astral or a dimensional realm where there is more going on than we see in the mainstream world. In Peru in 2006, I found that ayahuasca was a booming international business. About a third of all tourists to Iquitos go for ayahuasca. It is very accessible as something to do there. There are numerous jungle lodges that have sprung up all over Iquitos to cater for Western tourists. And what I was trying to comment on, here is a copy, by the way, of the output of the last 3 years. It's called A Shamanic Odyssey. It's a book that I've just completed, and the reason for the fundraiser is to try to help me raise some funds to get back to Peru, go full circle, to launch the book and give it back to the community worldwide, the ayahuasca community. There is a trade-off happening between the West and indigenous cultures where by using ayahuasca is a very sacred plant medicine. It can take a lifetime of usage for curanderos to learn how to use it properly, and it has to be done with the greatest respect and intent. And it all comes back to consciousness and intent and why we do things. In indigenous cultures in the Amazon, they use it as a medicine and as a spiritual tool. In the West, because of this business of shamanism, there is a bit of a trade-off happening where there's a different energy attached to ayahuasca. Now, I think that what I comment on the book is the business of shamanism as well as the spiritual experiences. But as the East or the indigenous cultures in the West unite, and indigenous Andean cosmology has a legend called the eagle and the condor, and the eagle is the totem of North America and the condor is the totem of South America. And there's some amazing prophecies that are all coming to fruition in these very potent times we live in. Most indigenous cultures have an understanding of cyclic time, and embedded within that cyclic time are world ages. And the Hopi, the Mayans, all different cultures are basically saying we're at the cusp right now in these next decade leading up to 2012 in the Mayan understanding of coming to culmination of one end of a world age and the beginning of a new age. The eagle and the condor prophecies point to a time when North America and South America, or by extension the Western culture and indigenous cultures, are coming together and they're merging. And part of the driving force behind that is ayahuasca and this resurgence in global shamanism. So that's what I set out to document in the book, which is just being brought out. There are no copies available except for this one tonight, which we're going to raffle off at intermission, along with an ayahuasca plant, and we'll talk about that at intermission. But please do have a look at the book's website, aofthebook.com. There's a lot of information up there. There's some excerpts, there's a gallery section, and we're going to be having a movie screening tonight called Ethnogenesis, which is created by an American crew called Critical Mass. They've roped together some of the most preeminent minds of our time to talk about issues of consciousness, entheogens, which is the more politically correct term these days for psychedelics. Entheogens means, it's Latin for to evoke the divine within, and it really refers to the plant sacraments more than man-made chemicals. So ayahuasca is definitely an entheogen because it does evoke the divine within, and there is a very much psychic journey that ayahuasca can take you on. There is so much that we could talk about ayahuasca, so what I'll do is let Dean Jeffries is going to, local filmmaker who has had a lot of experience with ayahuasca and did the documentary Shamans of the Amazon. Dean is going to screen just a little short movie, about 10 minutes, on some of his experiences at the Amazonian Shaman Conference last year that I'm going to go back to launch the book at this year. And then after that little short is over, we're going to screen Entheogenesis feature-length documentary, which will go for about 70 minutes. Then there'll be an intermission, and then we're going to have a panel discussion with some ayahuasca people from around the Shire. I wouldn't say experts, but really ayahuasca is something that a lot of people have experience with, and at the end of that we'll open it up to question and answers, and anyone who would like to contribute some of their experiences for the community to get a bit of a more understanding about what ayahuasca and what shamanism is. So thank you very much. Margaret participated in the Iquitos conference in 2006 and had some experiences with Peter Gorman and other Indigenous people.
Yeah.
Would you like to maybe just comment on what you learnt by participating in the Amazonian experience and going back to the source, and then bringing that back into Australia, and how you've integrated that into your own path and your practices?
Oh man, that's such a big question. First of all, I'm a mum with 3 daughters. For me, I came out of the psychedelic trance scene. I'd had all my psychedelic experiences mainly with acid, had done a lot of work with it, and knew that I wanted to be in that peak experience for the rest of my life, but that I couldn't take acid every day to get there. Mind you, some people would disagree and say that's perfectly okay, but for me I had to kind of keep it together, you know. So one thing led to another, and I stumbled across the word shamanism, and then stumbled across the word DMT, and then stumbled across the word ayahuasca. And somewhere within me something transformed, and I understood that I needed to go back to the source and go back to nature herself to learn about myself and where I fitted in and how to heal myself. So I suppose I did my first ayahuasca in Australia with friends, and then I actually did a circle in Melbourne just before I left to go to the conference. And Madre said to me somewhere in the middle of that circle, she said, "Are you really ready for the jungle?" And a bit of me went, "No, I'm not really ready for the jungle, but I'm going anyway." And that was an amazing experience for me. I went to some incredible spaces, and I went through some amazing trauma and some amazing purging. But I came out the other side knowing that it was worth every second of it, for myself, for the planet, for our own personal healing. Being able to take that experience and bring it back here and ground it into our Australian way of life has been really important to me, because I think one of the things that Madre has wanted with coming out to the West is to find other ways of experiencing herself as well, and other expressions and forms of expression of spirit, because that's who she is. She's the Holy Spirit, you know. So we're all being given an amazing, gracious opportunity to find new divine expression through working with the plants. And I work with grandfather Washuma as well, which is San Pedro cactus. So I have the opportunity to work with both male and female, and it's amazing to see how traditional understandings are now marrying with very modern understandings of, I suppose, the new paradigm of consciousness, which is coming very much from high integrity heart space medicine. So if we stay in those spaces, we will avoid some of the pitfalls of our egos and power trips and falling into witchery and sorcery, and always maintaining high spirit when we do our work. So I suppose that's really what I've learned so far.
Thank you, Margaret.
Yeah.
Ross?
Thank you.
To move along, we'll do, as Margaret did, just a brief introduction of things. A lot of you might be familiar with my next guest here. Touch her again. But Darpan, thank you for coming. You've been a shamanic practitioner for quite a while now, and I remember having conversations with you, and you've said that Terence McKenna was one of the first people to introduce you to the shamanism meme and the whole idea of ayahuasca. So do you think that since Terence's time there's been an evolution of the shamanism ideal, and you've actually flourished as a practitioner? Could you maybe explain a bit about your practices and how you've gone from that start, 10 years ago, to where you are now, and what you see in the global ayahuasca and the global resurgence of shamanism?
I'm a bit like Margaret. I spent years kind of exploring psychedelics, particularly mushrooms and LSD, and they were my first two teachers. And I'd read about ayahuasca years ago because I was writing a thesis on my psychology degree at university, and part of that thesis was looking at the role of plant medicines within the religious ecstasis, the religious experience. So my study was to take this kind of cultural iconography out of, say, Sufism, Taoism, Tantra, and psychedelics, and look at the common element of experiential consciousness expansion. And that was when I first came across the mention of the medicine ayahuasca, and it immediately piqued my interest. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to, at that time, get hold of it. That and peyote, I wasn't able to. So I explored the others prolifically at that time. But I always knew it would come later. I always had this feeling that it would somehow come across my path, and indeed it was like some 30 years later that I met some friends here that we were having a little study group, and we decided that we wanted to invite Terence over to talk, because I'd read a lot of his books, and he was by far the most authoritative and the most entertaining speaker about the medicine at that time. And to me, he was like a frontline herald, blasting the trumpet of the return or the resurgence of these plant medicines to heal that split between the Western mind and nature that had developed between the Western psyche and nature. And he'd written many books dedicated to his experiences, his explorations, and to his ruminations on what role that medicine was going to be playing in our culture. And he certainly talked a lot about how the role it played in the indigenous cultures, as an agent for healing, as an agent for, looking into the future, for initiation, even for warfare. It had many, many roles, the medicine in the jungle. It was like the tool through which they were able to apprehend their immediate environment, the peoples in the jungle, and also to use it as a guide, as a guidance for their way to integrate within their environment, within the jungle. However, Terence had this idea that it was going to be playing a different role in the West. And to answer your question, I do believe that there has been an evolutionary spiral happening with ayahuasca in the West, in the sense that it's taken on a different role. It's still the medicine, it's still performing all of the functions that it did in the jungle, but it has a greater function in that it's opening people up to their multidimensional nature, people who've been locked out of the garden for a long time, i.e. we in the West. People who've been focusing on, just a scientific empirical goal, and certainly enjoying the benefits of all of that, the technology that we've developed, the kind of systems we've developed in the West, but at the same time getting more and more and more divorced. It was almost like it said in that movie that the atomic bomb was discovered at the same time as LSD. It's almost like nature has this inbuilt checks and balances by which, if you go that far that way into the balance, then you have to balance it like this. And I do see that LSD, which was opened up around about the same time that plutonium was discovered, was the yin and the yang. It was like the balance of these incredible powerful agents, nuclear power and lysergide, inner consciousness power. And in the same way, as we were en masse destroying the rainforest in South America and elsewhere on the planet, from the rainforest comes the very antidote which is here to heal us or to show us the absolute childishness, the immaturity, the stupidity of how we keep shitting in our own backyard and expecting other people to clean it up, borrowing or stealing the natural resources from a certain people and then using it to advance our own agendas in the West. And so out of the jungle comes this medicine, which is suddenly popping up everywhere in the West, in every country. And it's not that anybody in particular is orchestrating this. In fact, nobody's orchestrating it. But you have the churches, the Barquinia, United Vegetal, Santo Daime, and many others. You have all the shamanic practitioners from the jungle. You have independent operators, such as the people here, who are working in principle, in accordance with the messages that are coming through this medicine itself. So the medicine itself, the ayahuasca literally means, aya means rope or vine, huasca means to the discarnate entities, to the deceased souls. So what it is, it's like a portal into the astral realms. And being a portal into the astral realms, there are a whole ecology of beings, of souls, who are orchestrating this thing. And it's amazing because it has this protective quality, because certainly, you know, as with every other psychedelic, there are people that have been arrested around the place for operating or for practicing their religious pursuits with this medicine or otherwise. But in almost every case, there's been either a legalization or an acquittal or a dropping of charges or something. Because I do believe that there is an inbuilt protection with this. It's like with LSD in the 60s, it was like a nuclear bomb in the collective. It went and opened up the consciousness in a way like a hammer on the rock. It was a very cathartic, explosive, plutonic experience. And as a result, there were a lot of casualties. There were a lot of people who fell by the wayside, a lot of people who were damaged, as well as people who were liberated. Because it was a kind of a chaotic experience, the 60s. Unlike what's happening with ayahuasca there seems to be an inherent protection around what's happening, because it is something that is a resurgence of something that is very ancient. McKenna was correct when he called it the archaic revival. It's really a resurgence of something that is ancient. I mean, if you go back into the history of human consciousness, in the ancient Vedic days, for thousands of years, people practiced the Soma cults. And you had the Kikion in Greece, which was another entheogenic sacrament that was used in a ritualistic way to open people up. Then there was the Sufi cults with all of their particular practices and many, many others. In fact, it's not just a medicine that comes from the jungle, because these same alkaloids, the beta-carbolines and the tryptamines, you can find throughout the history of human development, wherever you look. And I mean, in the Middle East, it was Hayoma, or the Syrian rue, or the Peganum hamala, which has exactly the same alkaloids as the vine does. And so there are what they call analogues of these plants all over the planet. So it's not just something that is specific to the jungle. That's just the most recent and the most famous one at the moment. But it really opens up the door to the fact that there were many mystery schools in the history of human consciousness, the development of human consciousness. And I believe that what's happening now is that there is a resurgence of the mystery school happening amongst human beings on this planet today. And well may it be so, because it comes at a very, very important time. As we know, we've just heard it all on the movie, and we're all aware of it anyway, that we're at a critical point on this planet. We can either go the way of plutonium, or we can go the way of DMT and LSD and open up. And perhaps both will happen at the same time. But the thing is that this antidote that comes from the jungle into the West is, of its own volition, proliferating everywhere. I mean, I started my own journey with it about 14 years ago, and I was very fortunate to have someone like Terence McKenna, who was sending me in the mail lovely little brown bottles for a couple of years, which I was able to experiment on myself with for a number of years and put myself onto a dieta. And it was only after I did that for a couple of years and did this dieta that the plant spoke to me and said, you know, you can now share this with your friends. And you don't have to copy anybody, but just be true to the principles of what the plant does, what the plant wants. That is, hold a circle that is absolutely a container, a safe container, so that everybody can be held in that circle, no matter what they go through. Because it seems to me that the medicine is the fastest way I've learned, and I've studied various different spiritual paths in this lifetime. It's the fastest way to unload karma, to really let go of old patterns, old psychic dead horses we've been carrying around all our life, if not for lifetimes, for ridding oneself of trauma, of early trauma, childhood trauma. None of us escape that. Everybody, every human being has some little embellishment or wound or scar that comes from our upbringing, through our conditioning. Well, what the medicine does, it shows you who you are outside of your conditioning. It shows you who you are once you take that shell off. And you see that shell is actually not you. That it's something that you've acquired over the period of growing as a child, that you actually started to identify with and think that's who you are. In other words, ego. It's conditioning. So it separates you from that, or let's say it dissolves that separation and brings you back to that place where you can feel yourself at one with all things. And it's a very simple thing. You don't need to learn lots of scriptures, you don't need to learn heaps of sutras, you don't need to have any qualifications of this or that, or go up any hierarchy of spiritual development. It's simple. Any child can understand it. It's just a simple giving and sharing of love. It's just simply hanging out with your friends with an open heart. It's simply being transparent, of not hiding, of just being present. It's simple. And it's not like, and that's the beauty of this medicine. And that's why I feel it's coming en masse on this planet at the moment. Why it's opening up everywhere. It's because that's what is needed for the next step in order for to make this quantum leap of consciousness that many of us are participating in and will make in our lifetime. And so that's the message that she brings to me, that is very feminine and very simple, childlike. It's innocent. Of course there is a dark side. There is a dark side to ayahuasca. And that dark side is having to face one's own shadow, having to face one's own wounds, having to face one's own baggage. And that's why a lot of the young people who've been coming to drink with me, just in the zone like that. It's mostly us older folks who've got all this baggage, who have to go through difficult and sometimes very challenging experiences in order to first recognize it and then let it go. But it's very quick. It's not like you have to pour over it. It's literally, it's showing you it. It's bringing what is unconscious into the light of awareness, and then you simply let it go. That's all it's me. You don't even need to know what it's about. Do you know what I mean? I've studied psychology. I know many people who've been in psychoanalysis for 20, 30 years. And they know everything about their problems. They know why it got from their mother or from their father, or this trauma happened when I was a kid, or that happened. And they can tell you everything about their trauma, but they still have it. It's still there. They become very knowledgeable about their problems. So it goes nowhere. You can go endless labyrinths down the psychoanalysis path. But this medicine, in one journey, sometimes, you can do a lifetime of work. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying that it's a panacea, instant, quick fix. It requires your consciousness, it requires your awareness, it requires a maturity and responsibility, to take responsibility for your own being and to face yourself on very deep levels. If you're willing to do that, then you're for ayahuasca. Then ayahuasca is for you. If you're not willing to take responsibility for who you are and that you create your reality moment by moment, then better don't touch the medicine, because you're either going to blame the medicine for what happens, or you'll blame someone like Margaret or me or Dan. Do you know what I mean? You're the reason why I'm feeling so bad. And so these people still need to learn that they are masters of their own reality. And everybody's a master. You may be a master of limitation, or you may be a master of expansion, but you're still a master. You create everything you experience in life. And I believe this is what the medicine is here to teach us in a very graphic way. And it teaches in a multi-dimensional way. Like, a lot of people get attracted to the visions because it's the most spectacular aspect of it. But really, yes, it's a font of information there. You can go into the Akashic records and visit past societies, civilizations, extraterrestrial realities, all kinds of amazing stuff. But to me, the most precious and often overlooked aspect of the medicine is simple. Any child will get it. And that is, it dissolves separation. It reunites you to the matrix of unity, the unity matrix. And that's just such a gift. It's so beautiful and it's so simple. And I've been drinking at least on a weekly basis, and often more than that, for 14 years, and I'm still not bored with it. Every time you go into the immersion, it's like, it's different. It shows you, it always brings you to that same place, but somehow it's just home. And so it's not something, it's like a multifaceted diamond. You can look at it and look at it and look at it, and it's just gorgeous. and never ceases to amaze and to hold one's attention. Yeah, so I do believe it's playing a large evolutionary role on this planet.
Cat's out of the bag now. That's ayahuasca. In ayahuasca, we're not going into the dream. Like, ayahuasca is the fundamental reality, the deeper dimensional experience you have on ayahuasca is taking you home, as Darpan said. And you've had some experiences, Dan, very powerful experiences with the indigenous tribes overseas, or maybe you can talk about that perspective over there, and again, you know, how that's changed you over here and what you're doing with that sort of direction in your life.
Well, I'll start off with thanking everyone for coming. Yeah, I think it's really important to ground whatever work anyone's doing in their life contextually in the place they're in and the people they share that with. And so I guess the best place to start with this is what drew me to live in Australia in the first place. And this eastern seaboard of Australia is actually a hotbed of tryptamines. The acacias are all loaded with tryptamines, and you know, it seems very appropriate that from an Australian indigenous perspective, the dreamings occurred here, and consciousness, a lot of consciousness as we know it, grew out of this place, this land. And so it seems quite an appropriate place for kind of the type of end of times thing that the tryptamines tend to introduce people to. And I think that being on the eastern seaboard kind of for the end of time as we know it, which is what the tryptamines show, the collapse of space-time, where you move into a space that can best be described by heart space. You know? From my readings of some of the Eastern philosophy, in Chogyam Upanishad, you know, they talk about the galaxy and stars and the sun and the moon and the earth and the mountains and the oceans all exist in a lotus-shaped temple in your heart. And so what we perceive out here is really an incredible mirror-like reflection, and so we kind of grapple with trying to adjust our reflection in the mirror, but essentially if we adjust ourselves then the reflection changes. And so all the work is actually inner work. All the work is learning how to cultivate self-love. And this is where ayahuasca, or the Australian equivalent somacacia, comes in. Is if we can find medicines in the plant world, in the animal world, in the crystal world, that are really good reflections back to us of where our shadow side is, of being able to see what it is that we don't normally associate with ourselves, then what happens is we get this huge jump in awareness and openness, which is kind of what's required at the moment for people to move in what's occurring at the moment on Earth. And so I'll share with you a story of drinking medicine with a Sequoia elder who's 96 years old, and he had come to Costa Rica because he was from Ecuador, and there was only 4 elder shamans left from the Sequoia tribe, which are renowned amongst the ayahuasca tribe in ayahuasca tribes in the Amazon basin, because of the potency of the medicine they have and the very strong ritual practices. And so there was an American oil company wanting to do oil prospecting in Ecuador, and the shaman elders basically turned around and said, look, you know, we can't give up our forest. And the oil company basically decided to speak to the young people and say, look, you could have speedboats and chainsaws and motorbikes and all these fantastic trappings, but the reason you're not getting all of this stuff is because these elders are stopping you. And so they put them up to actually threatening and bumping off one of the elders. And so the three remaining elders actually sought refuge outside of Ecuador while this blew over. And they ended up, we ended up raising some money to fly them to Costa Rica, and in order to raise the money, they were going to do ayahuasca circles. And so a very remote place in Costa Rica that you had to fly into Lima and then take a small plane to Drake and then get on a boat and go, 20 minutes and land on a beach and then walk another half an hour into the jungle. And beautiful place to drink tea. And when these guys arrived, there was a 96-year-old and a 76-year-old, and they were just so humble. And they just giggled at everything. It was incredible. And he had been inducted into shamanism at 8 years old. His grandfather he was lying in the hammock, and his grandfather had just squeezed some ayahuasca into his mouth. And his father was against it. And, so that's how he started. And he told a really interesting story. We were looking through a book which is quite infamous in I guess in people who are interested in ayahuasca. There's an artist called Pablo Amaringa. And Pablo Amaringa had created a fantastic book of all these drawings of visions. And we were looking through the visions, and we said to these elder shamans, we said, what do you think? And they just, sort of rolled their eyes and laughed, and they said, oh, those are just the earthly realms. They said, the heavenly realms are a whole different story, and you can actually get lost in these earthly realms for lifetimes. And so it's very important for them to at first take very strong medicine and connect with the heavenly people who gave them the secret of the ayahuasca in the first place, who left them the plants and then actually left this planet and went to a different dimension. And so each time they drink, the heavenly people come back to earth and speak to them, and they sing to them, and they then take them by the hand and basically guide them through these different dimensions. And they had some really interesting advice, which I think if anyone wants to drink ayahuasca, there's a few interesting tips that they had. One is, if someone offers you something in the ayahuasca, like a crown or a cloak or a necklace, you don't accept. If you're meant to have it, it appears on you. Because as soon as you accept, you enter into a type of contract. And that contract, because you don't understand what is happening, you end up trading energetically, and before you know it, you are caught up in a life realm. Now, this is what's happening to us in this reality all the time with, with products we buy, with food we eat, with people we relate to. And I guess these stories are just showing us the inner psychological realms played out like a dream. And so there's words of caution, but I feel that if we're true to ourselves and we're open and loving, that's the biggest step that we can take when we're exploring these realms, because they're all actually just aspects of ourselves. And the energy of this land, the energy of Australia, the energy of the Eastern Seaboard, I think is set up for this time, for this dreaming. And there was a stage, according to this theory of the expanding Earth, which I highly recommend you Google and have a look at, that the Earth at some stage in relatively recent history was about 40% of its size. And all the continents actually fit together. So this idea that the planet has been a stationary size or formed that size and has been static for this whole billions of years of evolution is an interesting concept, but it doesn't explain how all the continents fit together so Easily. So we were shown this idea of a Gondwana land, this one mega, or Pangaea, this one mega continent, and how these continents fit together. But on all their edges, these continents also fit together. And so the Earth was at one stage much smaller. And so Australia at that stage was actually connected to Peru. And funnily enough, the cane toads that come from Peru are the very toads that are hopping around here now. And there's an interesting factoid. In their parotid glands, they have a psychoactive substance called bufotenine, bufo from the toad. Now bufotenine is a poison to almost every animal except one, human. If I could call humans animals just for a moment. And it's what you call a synergistic psychoactive substance. So in the ayahuasca traditions in the Amazon, there's two main lineages of ayahuasca type medicine. One is called yahe and the other is called ayahuasca. And in the yahe, it's two vines. And the second vine, other than the Banisteriopsis carpi, is Diplopterus caberana. And Diplopterus caberana has dimethyltryptamine, which is a known brain chemical. It has 5-MeO-tryptamine, which is the strongest known psychoactive substance. That's also a brain chemical. And it has a third thing called bufotenine. And bufotenine has a potent synergistic effect. Now, all along the eastern seaboard, there are acacias packed full of tryptamines, which are these naturally occurring brain chemicals, both dimethyltryptamine and 5-MeO-tryptamine. And what's missing, in a sense, is this bufotenine. And what the bufotenine does, I feel, is it actually takes all this information and it grounds it into the body, into a living reality. And so the rainbow bridge, or this umbilicus to Lotus Land, is formed by
the cane toad.
Well, the cane toad is a very interesting part, and I don't believe that there's any mistakes. I believe everything is exactly as it is meant to be. And when the cane toads reach a certain actual proportion, there will be a mega tonnage of bufotenine, which is soon, which is very soon. The acacia fields will come back to life, and we, as a nation as well as the world, will experience what the original people walking on this land experienced in the dream time, because the experience of the tryptamine world is the dream time.
Yeah.
The collapse of space-time, when you're in a pure creative space, when you realize that every thought and intention you have has creative potential, and that you truly do manifest and create the world that you live in, you start to come to terms with, all right, well, what do I do now? And that's the practice, awakening to the fact that the world is not happening to you, but happening for you. And so I think this very critical juncture in time in Australia is, when we look back, we will see how amazing this introduction, for example, of the toads are to this country, and how and the part that they're going to play in reactivating the acacia fields, the dream fields.
So there's some mega downloads happening here tonight. It's great to see that we can all learn something, and we all have, a perspective on this. And it's not just ayahuasca; it's the planet itself. And as Dan was saying, the expanding earth thing, it reminded me of like a flower in bloom. And there's a niacinian quote that I think is on our fridge. It says, like, there came the time when it was more painful to hold on than to let go and sort of to bloom. And it's almost as if the planet is blooming, and us as humans and a layer of the planetary consciousness is sinking in and locking on and blooming with it and through it and all connected. and ayahuasca is one point of that connection. We're going to open up to some questions, but before we do that, Dean, would you like to say anything about your experiences?
Just a couple, just to
Yeah.
give a different type,
Just to introduce Dean properly. Dean did the documentary Shamans of the Amazon a few years back now.
Yeah, about 10.
10 years now, yeah. And that was screened on SBS, and I think that was an amazing, I mean, you know, I've seen that, a lot of people have seen that in the mainstream world. And then again, it was one of those media bridges to bring the idea of shamanism back into the mainstream so people could have that pathway open up. But what was your sort of...
Well, my main take, I was thinking, you know, what did I want to say? And I guess I've had, you know, exposure to ayahuasca for quite a while now, and really enjoy the times when I go there and when I go back to the Amazon and stuff. But I don't run circles myself. I sometimes take tours to the Amazon or whatever. But what I'm finding is that the plants and the ayahuasca have been really helping us to tune into the plant kingdom, the spirit kingdom, and also our own deeper spiritual self. And what I'm being drawn to at the moment, and I'm just sort of flowing however I'm sort of meant to flow with this, and that is that the whales for me are doing something which is, the ayahuasca has offered me similar learnings, and that is that the whales for me they're like a shamanic experience. Last year I went swimming with the whales in Tonga for a couple of months, and it was just like a 2-month ayahuasca trip in a way, because they're opening up to a closeness and a oneness with the animal kingdom, but also again through listening to their songs and listening to their presence. It's like, you know, accessing the Akashic records, accessing an element of the self. I was thinking the other day, what actually happens when you look into the eye of a whale, and I thought it's like tracing your DNA right back to a time when you were once whale, and when we were once whale. And if you see the flukes of the pectoral fins of a humpback, they've still got the fingers in the bones, you know, so like we have evolved from the whale. They're still whale, we've evolved into this human thing, and it's like when you look into the eye, it's like looking into a portal where you see where you've come from and where you can return to, and ayahuasca's teaching us that too, you know, that we're not separate from the plant kingdom, and the whale for me is also helping to drop the separation that we have, you know, and tune into the oneness that we have for all beings, and ayahuasca has a strong energy of love, of unconditional love, and it's very interesting for me. The whales express that energy as well. They've just got compassion just oozing out of them, you know, like Jesus Christ on the cross, just sort of complete surrender to what is, and still loving their enemy at the same time, which is, I think, you know, we're given various tools in this lifetime to achieve whatever we want, and you know, ayahuasca's been a great ally in that respect, and to, you know, the whales as well. So if anyone wants to come to Tonga with me, I just have a retreat coming up in a month or two. Yeah, that's basically it.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, I think that there, as you say, there really is a connection. It's not just us on the planet, you know. It really, what ayahuasca does do is open you up to the connection to all things, to that hologrammatic reality where everything's interconnected and interdependent, and, you know, the parts are contained in the whole as well. And the whales, as you were saying, almost heart chakra. I mean, they're one of the species on the planet, and all these species share in common, you know, the DMT in their chemistry. It's Dr. Rick Strassman did legal tests with DMT in the 1990s, and he calls it the spirit molecule. But he's hypothesized that it is like the chemical key to the dreaming, or to a space within ourselves that we're all connected to. It's like that pathway back to the source, and I think the whales kind of embodiment of this, have that abandon into their role in their heart chakra, into that new consciousness that is there to inhabit. So.
And on the I think ayahuasca was originally called telepathy because the abilities to have telepathic communication amongst the group. And I think the whales are actually living in that reality all the time, and they're also inviting us to be able to swim with them in that reality. You know, I'd love to take ayahuasca with the whales.
Yeah.
Or at least take ayahuasca on a boat with a hydrophone and they're listening to the whales.
If anyone else out there has experiences with ayahuasca or with shamanism in general and wants to say any words or ask any questions from anyone on the audience, please feel free to put your hand up or say up the back.
Hi, we were actually wondering when the next circle is.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify one thing I was saying about the toads.
Toad circle happening in the car park.
I'm
You don't have to take the toads, and you don't have to take the medicine.
It's energetic.
This is an energetic consciousness transformation that will happen no matter what you do, no matter how many toads you try and freeze.
My frogs don't like the toads.
Your frogs don't like the
No,
toads.
they don't like the toads. No.
So the gentleman, is he?
Am I hearing you right when you say there's a substance in the cane toad that takes the place of ayahuasca with the acacia?
What it does is it adds an element of an energetic grounding. So the difference between, let's say, ayahuasca and yahe in the Amazon is ayahuasca opens one up to these incredible visual experiences, which are very light-based. So much like when you're dreaming, where does the light come from? You know, when you have a dream at night, there may be a daytime scene. There's an ethereal light that is seemingly projected. So the ayahuasca gives people a clarity of vision, which they then have to use as a practice to integrate into their daily life through their body and the way in which they live. And so the ayahuasca doesn't necessarily do it for you. It just shows you a way, and then you still have to do the work. What the yahe tends to do with the bufotenine and the 5-MeO-DMT is it kind of is a more somatic experience, and it's more auto-integrative. And so there's less work in trying to make this visionary stuff applicable to your life here and now. It kind of goes into your body and heals your body or shows you something really in your life. So the difference is subtle on one level, but in accordance with what is occurring now on Earth and the potency of the dreaming that's coming out of this eastern seaboard of this continent is one that, for example, if you take this community, there's a large amount of consciousness focused on really practical ways, alternative lifestyles that are going to become really mainstream really quickly, from growing organic food to alternative power. You know, for the size of this community, there's actually a very potent concentration of people who already have amazing solutions for the world that we're going to move into.
That entrainment that was mentioned.
Entrainment.
I think that's it. Good to remember about the medicine as well. In the Amazonian system, they might use ayahuasca to achieve a visionary state or to connect with, you know, the higher dimensions or to heal. In the Andean system, they often use like stone magic or the other substances like the San Pedro cactus. And there's even a branch in the Andes of a tribe called the Quieros, who actually just use their own visionary abilities, and there's no sort of separation between them and the ability to connect to this. And they see all these things as tools that Mother Nature gives us whether it's the plants or the stones or other energy work, or shamanic dreaming. There's all these pathways back to the source, and so it's not something to easily commodify or put into just one box.
Can I just say something? What we're talking about, the grounding with the ayahuasca experience. We've been working with Grandfather Washuma and ayahuasca, not at the same time, but a day apart or sometimes 2 days apart. And it's amazing how Grandfather Washuma will help take those visionary, sometimes very high dimensional things and help ground them into your experience, or show them how it's attached to what you're doing in the present moment. And so I found it's been really beneficial to have the two medicines kind of talking to each other, which is what I'm finding they're doing more and more often. There's this kind of, we had a healing the other night where Madre explained to the girl that was being healed why she'd been in so much pain from Grandfather 2 nights before, and that he was doing part of the work that was necessary so that Madre could do the next bit of the work that was also necessary. So I'm seeing here that we're getting, like this Western, the Madre coming out of the traditional setting into the West, and here we are being able, quite often because we don't have any feelings of guilt or what's tradition, we sometimes just stumble across things in the West, or we're more open to them. But here's a really interesting way that the two medicines, the two spiritual entities or the beings that are behind the medicines are actually coming together and saying, look, we work together. Plus, we're aspects of two different parts. It's like we've got Madre, who is so mother, and then we've got Grandfather Washuma, who is very masculine on a lot of levels, you know, so it's like this beautiful balancing out of energies when they come together. So that's just something about, because that integration is all important. So we're seeing too many people who are playing with the plants and not doing it in a sacred set space with good people and good stuff around them. And I'm seeing a lot of people who are being badly affected by that experience, and it's not necessary. There's no need for it, and we actually need to be doing more education of our communities, especially as young people have access to the internet and are able to go and explore, but without a culture in the West that is truly supportive of the sacred nature and the transformational nature of this work, and we've got people who are not being supported, then we're going to see this happening. And I'm seeing too much of it, and I would really like us as a community to reflect on it and be responsible with how, if we are going to practice with the medicine, that we are of highest ethical standards and we provide safe spaces and follow-up work, and you know, that everything is done to make this a magnificent spiritual healing adventure, which is what it should be. There should be no trauma except what's experienced in circle and let go. That's it. So, you know, and that's why we all have to come together and support ourselves, you know. It's a new journey, it's beautiful, but we're stepping into community healing now with our medicine work. All of us together. And so we have responsibility with how we give it out. And thank you, darling. Sorry, I do go on sometimes.
No, that's good.
It's my granny on the seats
Question
for me.
up the back.
Yeah, you mentioned before like tips, things like don't accept items.
Yeah, that was only one
On the
tip,
spiritual
not the
level,
other tips.
entity.
Yeah,
More tips.
yeah, more tips.
Hyperspace 101, thanks, Robert.
Hyperspace 101. I'm going to consult the ops for some of these too. Yeah, so that's definitely one of the tips. Others is not to be too caught up in the visions, because the visions themselves are sometimes just the deep psychological kind of ripples reflected back to you. And so there's a temptation to look at the visions as if it's some reality that's really kind of important. Yeah. And so don't get too caught up in the illusion, because there are levels and levels of illusion, and when you are totally awake and open and clear, then the visions become clear and they reach a different frequency where you can really recognize yourself clearly. Do you want to add something?
I'd just like to add something to that. Yeah, that's a really good point, Dan, because, you know, obviously when people first get attracted to the medicine, they're attracted by the more, as I said, spectacular aspects of it, and that's the visions. And in the West, we place a lot of emphasis upon that. If you go into Ayahuasca forum, people are really caught up in the visions and stuff. And I'm not just discounting that, because there are sometimes really when the medicine is saying, pay attention, really pay attention now. And I always get it by this sensation. It's almost like a dizziness. And I get this rising of energy, and it's just like, oof, okay, now really pay attention, because I'm being downloaded, I'm being told, something needs to be integrated and information is being received. But for the rest of the time, it's like, imagine if you were a blind person and you could suddenly see the physical world. You'd be going, wow, that's fantastic. Wow, whoa, that's psychedelic. And you'd be like so fascinated with details. But after a while you go, yeah, well, there's a chair and there's a person, this is the general topography going on. And if I need to pay attention, I will. But otherwise, it's going on and I'll pay attention to where I put my focus. Similarly with Ayahuasca. It's like the astral topography is no different from the physical topography, in the sense that it is a topography. And you come, and all kinds of beings and entities will come to you and try and tell you stuff, show you stuff, you know, involve you with stuff. I don't pay any attention to that. You know, like, basically, it's a lot of people when they first smoke DMT or drink ayahuasca, they go, wow, an entity came and told me this, therefore it must be true, and they must know more than I do, and therefore, blah, blah, and they start to really go, it's crap. I mean, it's just like the astral world is no different from the physical world. You meet somebody, and if you feel like a heart-opening thing where you feel, yes, it's like a good friend, you just know, I trust this person, then you listen and you share. But there are so many mischievous entities in the astral world, just as there are in the physical world. And you wouldn't just trust your deepest inner stuff with just anybody unless you really felt that connection. And so similarly, I would say, you know, just be aware. You know, always put the ring of dominion around yourself. That's why in the old occult days, the wizard, the magician would put a ring around, because all kinds of elementals and energies will come in to try and engage you and grab your attention, grab your energy, and sort of dominate or like monopolize you. And I've seen so much evidence of this, of people who don't hold circles that are like a tight container. All kinds of other little energies can come in, not just little, sometimes big energies, unwanted ones. And I've heard of people having all kinds of psychological problems and really, really intense experiences that were not nice because the circle wasn't held correctly, and because they've poo-pooed ritual or something. And the whole art of ritual, like Margaret was just saying, has been lost in the West. We've lost our rites of passage, our sexual rites of passage, our rites of passage into manhood and womanhood, men's business, women's business, our sense of the numinous, of the sacred, of the divine, has been commercialized and made into, you know, an advert, or an advert for a quick, you know, like whatever. It's just been demagnetized. All the psychic energy has been taken out of it. And so part of what we're doing with this resurgence of medicine is reanimating that sense of the numinous, the sense of holding space, holding sacred space. And that's where the healing happens. The medicine, when it was downloading me, just said, look, it doesn't matter whether you're a Muslim, a Christian, you know, a Buddhist, whatever. Whatever your beliefs are just your beliefs, nothing else. I will work with them, because one of the beauties of the medicine is that she will speak to you in your language. If you pray to Jesus, Mary and the Apostles, you'll probably see Jesus, Mary and the Apostles. If you're a shamanic person working with the spirits of the jungle, that's what you'll tend to be seeing. If you're a Muslim, you may see something very different. It doesn't matter about the belief system. It's just that it's the medicine using whatever iconography you have in your brain, in your conditioning, to speak to you at a very intimate level so that there's no ambiguity. Because sometimes when one religion is speaking to another, we can see the results of that. There's all kinds of ambiguities and misunderstandings to the point where they'll start killing each other about whose God is real and the best and all of that. Like, my dad's bigger than your dad, he'll cut your head off or something. You know, that kind of level of stupidity. So the medicine will use whatever belief system you want to choose. Just make sure the container is tight. That's all it asks. It asks for a tight container, so the cup you pour into that container, by the container I mean the circle, so then she can come in and do her work. So the job of a facilitator is just to keep the circle tight and safe, and then there won't be any abreactions. People will go through difficult stuff, but there won't be abreactions to the point of, you know, harm or damage to somebody, which can happen if you don't take care of the circle. So I just wanted to say that because it's a really important point. So that's the most, and the thing is that, you know, it is a multi-dimensional substance. So it's not just about the visions. The visions, the shamans say, oh, we put the chacruna in for the light. But the real healer is ayahuasca. They don't call the brew chacruna or okoyahe or all that, but it's called ayahuasca because ayahuasca has, it's shaped like a DNA spiral. It unlocks the phylogenetic memories inside the DNA in our cells. So in that phylogenetic memories is every memory from the most single cell protozoa all through the evolutionary scale to human beings and even beyond our evolutionary scale is there inside the DNA. So it's like it's the thing, because I know many people who've been smoking DMT for years and I don't see any real appreciable change in their nature, like they're just smoking it, and I don't see them becoming more integrated as a being or becoming more loving to their children or becoming more integrated into the community. But I do see this with ayahuasca. I see it a lot. And I see people who have got addictive patterns lose them. And I see people who genuinely go to their higher octave through work. It's not just easy, drink the medicine. The medicine gives you what you need to do, and then you need to put that into practice outside the circle. And the medicine seems to know innately whether you're doing that or not. If you're not, she'll just stop going. It's like any teacher go, look, come back when you're ready, sort of thing. And she won't give you that much. Nothing might happen. That's quite common, nothing happens. But if you genuinely and sincerely put into practice what she's teaching you, she'll give you more and more and more. And she'll never stretch the envelope more than you can handle. But she'll give you as much as you want. And so in that sense, respect is the biggest, is key. Full respect, like you would give to an elder, like you would give to a great teacher, like you would give to your mother or your father or to a very trusted friend. Respect is the most important key to come to the medicine. Humbleness, humility, not putting on airs to the medicine, not using it as a thrill or a curiosity thing or a you know, seeking some sort of. I mean, sometimes that's what brings people to the medicine, and that's okay. But soon they will transform that energy. But if it continues, you either get chased out of the room or you just lose interest. But respect and sincerity are the two most important things, and from there a lot can happen, everything can happen.